Tiny Tina's Wonderlands has seen some significant changes and improvements since launch, and with the recent Steam release we wanted to look back on some of the biggest changes that have been made to the game over the past few months. So whether you've just picked up the game or are returning after not touching it for a while, we'll tell you everything you need to know right here. Thanks to 2K for sponsoring the video. Check out the link in the video description for more info on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. A like would really help the channel out, and let's go. And while there are some big changes to discuss, there's also some really nice quality of life features that have been added to the game. At launch, cosmetic drops would often be confusing as their loot beam was the same color as that of purple rarity gear, so the color was later changed to a yellow loot beam to make them easier to recognize. Also, if you pick one of the character classes that comes with a pet, so the Clawbringer, Graveborn or Spore Warden, you'll be happy to know that you can now change the name of your pets at a quick change station, which wasn't the case at launch. A much bigger change that was made after launch was the loot luck. This stat, which is visible on your character stat page, determines your chance to get legendary drops, so you want it to be as high as possible. You can raise it by leveling up, by activating a special shrine on the overworld. We made a video on that one, by the way, which we'll link to at the end of this one if you want to watch it, but a big way to improve your loot luck is by collecting these golden lucky dice. The more you collect, the higher the multiplier will get, which means that finding all 260 of them will significantly increase your chances of getting legendary gear. The problem was that you needed to collect all of these on each character you made. I say was because an update changed the loot luck stat to be shared across all characters on your account, meaning that if you've collected all dice on a single character, all characters will benefit from a maximum buff to loot luck, even any new character you might make. We'll leave a link to a guide with all the dice locations in the video description for if you're still missing some. Of course, there have been some changes on the balance side of the game as well, and while some very overpowered weapons were nerfed, there's also been a lot of weapon types that have seen some significant buffs since launch. All sniper rifles have seen their damage buffed by 20%, and magic poison SMGs are now way more usable since they no longer ramp up in damage over time, but instead deal their maximum amount of damage straight away. And a lot of manufacturer specific shotguns have also been buffed, like Black Powder and Hyperius, which means that the amazing rain of arrows and crossblades legendary shotguns are even stronger than before. And you will need these strong weapons to tackle the Chaos levels, Wonderland's endgame system that unlocks after finishing the main story. In a very similar way to Borderlands 3's Mayhem levels, Chaos levels raise a variety of stats like enemy HP and damage, but also gold and experience gained, and more importantly, loot luck. So the higher your Chaos level, the more challenging your enemies, but the better your rewards will be. And while playing with these Chaos levels active, you might even see Chaotic Gear drop, which are variants of an item with better stats than the regular version. At launch, the cap for these Chaos levels was 20, the same level at which Volatile Gear would start to spawn, which are even better variants than the Chaos ones. Right around the launch of the first DLC, the cap was raised to 35, which not only greatly increased the drop chance for Volatile Gear, but also introduced the third Primordial tier to the game. And just now, with the release of the Molten Mirrors DLC, the cap has once again been raised from 35 to 50, which also means there is another new tier of loot ascended for you to grind for. To give you an idea, when comparing a chaotic weapon to a normal variant of the same gun, you see an increase of about 25% in damage. For a volatile drop, this increase jumps to roughly 80%, while a primordial weapon sees the stat increase to 95%. The increase on ascended gear should be even higher then, although with a drop chance of less than 1% on Chaos level 50, they're going to be pretty rare drops. And to unlock new Chaos levels, you do of course need to enter into the Chaos Chamber, which is another feature you unlock after finishing the main quest. In the Chaos Chamber, you select and complete a randomized selection of encounters to reach a loot room at the end. Here, you can spend the crystals you earn during your run on specific types of loot, which was always the case, but what's also been added are 3 vending machines in this loot room that will have a specific legendary for sale. These legendaries will be swapped out every week, but due to the different vending machines, you can be assured that you can at least buy 1 weapon, 1 spell, amulet or ring, and 1 ward or class mod, which is pretty awesome. Another change you might notice here is the increased amount of moon orbs you get from opening the final chest in this loot room, which is a part of a larger overhaul to this system. Moon orbs were always part of the game. They're a currency that allow you to reroll the enchantment on your gear at an increasing cost, which you do at these machines marked by a wizard's hat on your minimap. Since launch, the maximum amount of this currency you can carry has been raised significantly. You earn moon orbs at a faster rate, and the cost of rerolling an enchantment caps out at 4,000 orbs, making the system much more usable and accessible. Two classes in specific have also seen some big buffs since launch. The Stabblemancer and Clawbringer specifically have been looked at because they were underperforming at higher chaos levels, and while some big buffs to the Stabblemancer's Capstone and Ghostblade action skill seem to have fixed the problem, the Clawbringer is still receiving buffs as of the most recent patch, which buffs some skills tied to ability damage. Gearbox also noted they didn't want to make big changes until after the release of the new class, so there might be some more significant adjustments coming in the future too. And yeah, speaking of a new class, that is of course the most exciting piece of content still coming to the game. The Blightcaller, as we recently learned it's called, is a shamanic elementalist who channels spirits and summons storms to wear down foes with poison and elemental damage. It will launch alongside the final piece of DLC, the Shattering Spectre Glass, which means it is included in the Season Pass. While we currently know very little, we should receive more info on the Blightcaller skills closer to launch. We also learned from senior writer Sam Winkler that the new class also comes with a new player character voice for us to choose from. And of course, thanks to Wonderlands' multi-class system, a feature unlocked about halfway through the story, you will be able to check out this new Blightcaller class and all its skills on your main character by simply respeccing at a quick change station. And on the note of DLC, we do of course have 3 pieces of content already added to the game if you own the Season Pass: the Coiled Captors, Gluttoned Gamble and Molten Mirrors. All 3 of these work in a very similar way. You enter a new location through one of the Mirrors of Mystery, then play through a dungeon with some specific objectives per room and end with a boss fight. While these dungeons are a bit on the short side, these locations and bosses are also added to the random encounter pool used for the Chaos Chambers. On top of that, there are multiple variants of the final boss of a mirror released on a weekly basis after the DLC drops, which also means new loot drops are being added to the pool as you go back to fight the stronger form. And these new loot drops are even easier to get thanks to recent improvements to the Wheel of Fate, which should now drop more DLC specific legendaries as well. But even if you do not own the Season Pass, there is still a steady stream of new weekly events and featured runs in the Chaos Chamber for you to enjoy. Both of these are free for all players, with the weekly events increasing the drop rates for cosmetic drops from badass enemies or having you gain more crystals in the Chaos Chamber. The featured run, on the other hand, is a non-randomized Chaos Chamber run, so it's the same for everyone, that changes on a weekly rotation. The current featured one was actually handpicked by the community to feature only mimics, so the enemies that disguise themselves as treasure chests and drop a lot of loot, so there's some fun stuff there for sure. Also, with the Molten Mirrors patch, a new boss-only Chaos Chamber run was also added as a permanent feature. This lets you skip the normal encounters and just jump into a gauntlet of boss fights and obelisk encounters if that's more your style. Thanks for watching, leave a like if you liked the video and subscribe so you won't miss the next one, and if you want, you can watch our previous video on some great tips for farming legendaries. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.